Good afternoon to one and all. Good afternoon to you all. We are here today to conduct the webinar on carbon credits in agriculture, concepts and mechanics, facilitative role of CMAs. This function is organized by the Cooperative Development Board of the Institute. Today we are having our speaker, Reverend Speaker, CMA Dr. S.K. Gupta sir, who will throw upon the lights on the event.
Thank you.
But before starting, I just want to play the National Institute's anthem. Please.
तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति।
Yes. So before starting the session again and handing over the mic to Dr. S.K. Gupta sir, I just want to share a brief profile with you about Dr. Gupta sir. Dr. S.K. Gupta is a postgraduate in commerce. He's a gold medalist, fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, a fellow member of the Institute of Cost and Management Cost Accountants of India, PhD in corporate governance with over 42 years of corporate experience in leadership positions with various public and private sector organizations in the domains of finance, costing, internal audit, sustainability, integrated reporting, and company secretarial functions. Currently, Dr. Gupta is the Managing Director of Registered Valuers Organization of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. He is also Chief Executive Officer of ICMAI Social Auditors Organization and Chief Operating Officer of ICMAI International ADR Chamber. Dr. Gupta has chaired and addressed a large number of national and international seminars and conferences. He has been a visiting faculty at various leading business schools for over 3 decades. He is a member of various industry associations. Dr. Gupta is editor-in-chief for various professional journals. He is a prolific writer. He has written over 300 articles and research papers, which are regularly published in various professional, national, and international journals. He is currently guiding 5 PhD scholars. He has also conducted management development programs, both open programs and in-house for various companies. So right now our request is to Dr. Gupta sir, over to you. You please throw upon the lights on the present topic. Please, sir.
Thank you so much, madam, for your very gracious introduction and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. I thank the chairman of the Cooperative Development Board, Central Council member Navneet Kumar Jain sir, for giving me an opportunity to share my perspectives on this very exciting, new and emerging concept of carbon credits in agriculture and what role CMS can play in this particular domain in coming times. So that is what I'm going to discuss today. Carbon credits. What are carbon credits? How carbon credits can arise in agriculture and what role CMS can play in this entire ecosystem of helping out the agricultural sector in improving productivity, earning more revenue, becoming more efficient, becoming more effective. That is what we are going to cover in today's presentation. Well, we are all very lucky to be living on this beautiful planet today. You have rivers, you have mountains, you have beautiful earth, you have sun, you have flowers, you have birds, you have grass. Just about beautiful planet that we are all living in. How many of us are there on this planet as of now? There are 7 billion people. 7 crore approximately people are living on this planet as of today. And it is estimated that by the year 2050, number of people living on this planet is going to increase by another 2 billion. The challenge is, how do we sustain life? How do we sustain all these people living on this particular planet? That is the challenge that all of us have to think about. And the biggest and the greatest challenge is, how do we produce the food and where do we produce the food, which is one of the most critical, vital element for survivability of the human beings on this beautiful planet. The challenge is, how do we feed them all? 700 crore people already there, and they're going to become 900 crore by 2050. All these people need to be fed in future, and we also have to keep in mind the fact that the economies are growing, all the countries are developing economically, the economic well-being of the people is increasing day by day, and therefore people are going to have more money to spend on food. And therefore, the challenge that we have is how and where we produce food. And that is through agriculture. And that is the focus of our interaction today. How do we ensure availability and production of the food for the population and for the people living on this planet? How can we ensure that production of food happens in a sustainable manner? And how can we ensure that agriculture becomes efficient, more effective? And what role does carbon credit concept play in bringing about sustainable farming into the focus? There is a long list of sources of carbon emission, and agriculture is one of the sources of carbon emission. Therefore, people sometimes think whether agriculture has something to do with global warming. Yes, it definitely has. This presentation will discuss and deliberate on how global warming happens, the basics, how agriculture contributes to global warming, what steps can be taken to change agricultural practices with a view to dealing with the impact of climate change, which is staring before us, and how farmers can generate agriculture or soil-based carbon credits, and how they can earn extra revenue by selling out, exchanging these carbon credits for the efforts that they have made in order to improve their is the presentation visible, please?
Yes, sir. Now it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Continue. Please continue, sir.
Thank you. So let us first understand the basic concepts of greenhouse gases, greenhouse effect, global warming, and climate change. Many a time we would have heard of these terms, but let us try to revisit and understand the basic concept behind each one of these terms. Greenhouse gases are those gases present in the Earth's atmosphere that trap heat, and they act similarly to a glass in a greenhouse. The greenhouse effect is the process through which the heat is trapped near the Earth's surface by the substances which are known as greenhouse gases. And some of the major greenhouse gases are the carbon dioxide, the methane, nitrous oxide, and a few more. But the major component of greenhouse gases is the carbon dioxide. So what is the usefulness of presence of these greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere? A reasonable level of these greenhouse gases helps to maintain the Earth's temperature at a comfortable level for all of us. Scientists and research has determined that carbon dioxide plays a very, very critical role in maintaining the stability of the Earth's atmosphere. We are talking about pollution all around us on the planet, arising out of industrial activities by the vehicles, and there is pollution happening also because of the agricultural activities. Yes. Increased emission of carbon dioxide from the earth increases heat trapping greenhouse gas levels, leading to global warming. That means if there is a particular level of greenhouse gases present in the Earth's atmosphere, they will let the heat from the planet go past that particular layer of the Earth's atmosphere so that a reasonably comfortable global warming level is maintained on this Earth. But when the concentration of greenhouse gases, more particularly that of carbon dioxide, increases, then the warmth emanating from the Earth is not able to pass through that particular layer, and that will lead to, and that is leading to, increase in average global temperatures. And if it continues to happen like that, a time will come when the temperature of this planet, of this Earth, will become more, and that will lead to a lot of changes taking place in the ecosystem, and the natural balance of nature will be disturbed. And that will pose a huge risk for the human beings as well as all other forms of life existing on this Earth. That is the basic concept. A certain amount, a certain level of carbon dioxide is required in the Earth's atmosphere as part of the greenhouse gases. But when that concentration level or when the quantity of carbon dioxide present increases beyond a certain level, it becomes disastrous for the life on this planet, on this Earth, because the temperatures therefore are likely to increase, and that's going to lead to a lot of changes taking place in the Earth in terms of melting of glaciers, melting of ice, maybe storms happening, maybe a lot of other impacts on the human beings and other life or life existing on this particular Earth. So the carbon dioxide is generated by various sectors of the economy. Agricultural sector also contributes to emission of carbon dioxide. It happens because of the use of manures, because of the use of synthetic fertilizers, because of the cultivation of organic soils, because of burning of crop residues. Agriculture contributes a great deal to increasing the CO2 levels present in the Earth's atmosphere. Therefore, what is important is, from the perspective of the agriculture, we all need to focus on improving the soil health. Intensive application of fertilizers and pesticides has depleted soil carbon levels and consequently degraded the soil. That's very interesting. We don't want more carbon dioxide to be present in the Earth's atmosphere because it will have negative impact on the global climate, but at the same time, we want more carbon to be present or more carbon dioxide to be present in the soil, because that kind of acts as a trap or as a sponge which retains the nutrients of the soil and thus increases and improves upon the productivity of the agriculture or productivity of that particular piece of land. Various estimates suggest that almost up to 30% of the India's total geographical land area has been degraded, depleted on account of application of fertilizers and pesticides. Soil comprises of various organic matter which consist of carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, predominantly carbon, which accounts for almost about approximately 50% of the soil organic matter is made up of carbon. Therefore, soil carbon management, therefore, is a very, very vital element for maintaining health of the soil, for sustaining productivity of the land. It is very important that we manage the carbon level present in the soil in an effective manner by forming and by using sustainable agricultural practices. In a research paper published in 2017, Australian microbiologist and climatologist Walter Jean said, Earth's soil carbon sponge, which is formed by the mixture of mineral and other organic stuff, has capacity to absorb and retain rain, water. It improves access to essential nutrients and supports a diverse range of microbial processes. And what happens when the soil carbon levels drop? The reverse of this happens. That means ability of the soil to be able to absorb and retain water becomes less. The soil is not able to retain the water, not able to absorb the water. And this constrains the effect of rainfall and leaves the topsoil prone to runoff and erosion. And this consequently leads to floods or droughts. So the whole ecological system of the earth, especially with regard to soil and agriculture, it undergoes a huge and significant change when the soil carbon levels drop. Reduction of biomass below the soil, increased soil erosion, higher tilling causes higher percentage of carbon dioxide to be released from the earth into the air, which has two effects. It leaves the soil less fertile. At the same time, it increases the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere. Both of these have negative impact on the humans and other living beings. So what do? There's something like carbon sequestration. The practice of removing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in soil. This is the process that, if appropriately practiced and appropriately followed, we can cut down on the level of carbon dioxide present in the Earth's atmosphere so that we are able to maintain a reasonable level of temperature on this Earth. At the same time, if we are able to increase the carbon in the soil of the Earth, that's going to help the agriculture, that's going to help improve the productivity of the soil. And that is the process that is technically called carbon sequestration. So we need to increase soil carbon levels, and we got to reduce the carbon dioxide levels in the Earth's atmosphere so that it leads to dual benefits with regard to climate change and also the agriculture. So what is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is a process by which the air's carbon dioxide is extracted and stored in a soil carbon pool. How does that happen? It's a natural process. That's the beauty of nature. It's a very, very natural process. We all are aware about the process of photosynthesis. What happens during photosynthesis is that plants break down carbon dioxide and water from the atmosphere into oxygen, sugar, and carbon-rich compounds. And during the process of photosynthesis, these carbon-rich compounds reach the roots and the soil underneath. And this improves the soil quality because it nourishes the organisms below the soil. So in the process of photosynthesis, what happens? Carbon is drawn from the Earth's atmosphere. It gets broken down into oxygen, sugar, and other carbon-rich compounds. These are reaching the roots of the particular plants or the vegetation, thus improving fertility and the quality of the soil underneath, leading to better productivity for agriculture. We all have studied this cycle, CO2 cycle in our school days, you know. Photosynthesis happens and the CO2 enters the leaves. Then it ultimately goes to the roots and it enters the soil. But at the same time, there is a continuous process of CO2 being generated, carbon being generated by vehicles polluting the atmosphere, by other industrial activities polluting the atmosphere. CO2 is being generated, goes to the Earth's atmosphere, but by and through the process of photosynthesis, it is again getting back onto the soil. So what is the way by which we can trap the carbon which gets into a plant by way of the photosynthesis process, reaches its root, reaches onto the bottom of the soil? How do we ensure that it remains trapped in that soil? It doesn't get evaporated. It doesn't get out of that sponge. That is the best thing. If you can try and do that somehow, that's something which is going to benefit the humanity by increasing the carbon element in the soil, which is a positive aspect, and reducing the carbon content beyond a particular level. It should not go. So reducing the carbon content in the Earth's atmosphere, that is what we are looking at, developing practices of sustainable farming by which we can achieve these twin objectives of reducing carbon dioxide from the Earth's atmosphere and increasing the carbon levels at the soil level or the grassroots level. So we are going to talk about in detail what a farmer can do, what new agricultural practices we must follow with a view to ensure all this, which all forms within the gamut of sustainable agriculture. But let me just briefly talk about techniques that reduce the loss of carbon from soil. That means once the carbon compounds enter into the leaf and then travel through stem onto the root in the soil, they stay there. They don't get evaporated, they stay there. How do we make sure that they are absorbed as kind of a sponge and they remain there in the soil as kind of carbon pool? How do we ensure that? What are the agricultural practices which can lead to restoring the soil health and improving the carbon content on the soil? One of the techniques is cover cropping to keep the land covered at all the times. Cover the land. How? Maybe you can have multiple cropping done at the same time. Don't leave any space in between the two plants, whatever. Or there are also varieties of shrubs and varieties of plants which are just planted with a view to providing shade to the soil below and to provide a cover to the otherwise cash generating crop with a view to ensuring that carbon compounds stored below the soil don't get an exit route and they stay trapped in the soil, thus improving fertility and productivity of agriculture. We can also look at recycling the soil's bio-waste. We can control and manage manure compost and the usage of biofertilizers. We can also achieve this by way of better crop rotation and intercropping. We can do appropriate flood irrigation and use of chemicals. When farmers follow these practices for a long time, for few seasons, it doesn't happen overnight. The carbon content of the soil increases, improves, and as a result of that, the agricultural yield increases. But then, why should I do all this? Everyone is going to ask this question. Why should I do all this? Well, farmers may need an incentive to adopt these practices, as these sustainable farming practices can be time consuming. It will take a lot of time to get the results. Expensive, yes, they will have to incur some initial expenditure, and unremunerative in the short run without getting any return. Some expenditure may have to be incurred on the sustainable agricultural farming practices. That's where the concept of carbon credits serves as an incentive to the farmers to practice sustainable agriculture practices so that they improve the quality of the soil, they improve the productivity of their soil agriculture. At the same time, they also tend to earn some additional revenue by following sustainable farming practices or sustainable agricultural practices. What are green credits or what are carbon credits in agriculture? Carbon credits are instruments that monetize quantifiable reduction in CO2 gas emissions achieved by certified climate action projects. What is a carbon credit? These are like instruments where you can quantify by use of a certain practice in agriculture, by use of sustainable farming practices, how much of the CO2 pool in the soil had been increased over a period of time. And this can be quantified by way of measurement. And thus you can certify efforts taken by a particular farmer or by a farmers producing organization or by a similar organization and acknowledge their efforts in creating soil carbon pool by way of certain sustainable farming practices followed by them. A carbon credit represents either greenhouse gases removed from the atmosphere or greenhouse gas emissions reduced. You can earn a carbon credit in two ways. Either you reduce the carbon present in the Earth's atmosphere, you reduce carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, or you reduce the emission of carbon dioxide from the Earth. Again, coming back to the basic, we want more carbon dioxide or more carbon compounds to be present in the soil. That's good for agriculture, good for soil. But at the same time, we don't want beyond a certain level carbon dioxide to be present in the Earth's atmosphere, because then that will lead to global warming and a climate change which will have negative impact on the living beings on this Earth. So there are two ways in which you can earn carbon credits. Either reduce the presence of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere, or increase or reduce rather the emission of carbon dioxide from the Earth. In the case of farming, agriculture, how do you create carbon credits? Based upon how much carbon you are able to store in the carbon pool in the soil on which you are carrying out agriculture. There are certain people who are emitting carbon dioxide. There are challenges. They can't do away with that. there are certain industries, by way of the very nature of that industry, you can't do away with CO2 emission. It's going to happen. But then, looking at this planet as a comprehensive, unified, integrated ecosystem, there are certain areas, there are certain activities where people are making efforts to cut down on the CO2 emissions, and therefore they are looking for some kind of incentive, some kind of return for their efforts. And they want those people who are actually polluting this environment, who are creating CO2 emissions, to pay for that. And that's how a market is created whereby the carbon credits are exchanged between people who reduce carbon emissions and people who continue to do carbon emissions. There is a market that emerges for exchange of carbon credits amongst themselves. Carbon credits are a medium of exchange used to offset CO2 emissions under the Paris Agreement. The idea is that companies responsible for emitting CO2 have to reduce their emissions. If they are not able to do that to the extent required or mandated by law or by certain agreements, they must pay for the efforts made by others who are trying to reduce the carbon emission. And that's where the carbon credits in agriculture become important. Certain companies who are continuing to emit CO2, they must pay for the efforts of the farmers who are trying to move to sustainable farming practices, and therefore they're cutting down on CO2 emissions. You must pay for their efforts. So in a way, it would provide a revenue source for the agriculturists. At the same time, it would become a kind of an expense or a cost to be borne by those people or those industries who continue to emit CO2. And this exchange between the buyers and the sellers of carbon credit, it becomes a kind of a market where these carbon credit instruments are traded between the buyers and the sellers. Buyer can be anyone who wants to reward climate change mitigation activities. Either you yourself do whatever is possible to reduce the carbon emissions, and if you are not in a position to do anything, please contribute to the efforts of others who are doing something in this direction by paying to them by way of the purchase of a carbon credit, so that they get incentivized to do more in order to cut down on the CO2 emissions on this planet. So the carbon credit monetization can just be the nudge, We are talking about sustainable farming practices. When you go and talk to a farmer and tell him, well, Baba, follow these practices, these are going to be sustainable agricultural practices. But the farmer says, what is in it for me? How do I benefit? What you are telling me is going to take 3 years, 4 years to happen. And I have to incur certain expenditure for getting into sustainable farming practices. What is the incentive that I should get into all this? Carbon credit monetization can be the nudge. This can prove to be a kind of an incentive for the farmers or people in the agriculture sector to adopt sustainable agricultural practices whereby they are able to stop emission of carbon dioxide and they are able to create larger quantity of carbon pooled in the soil, thus improving fertility and productivity of soil. Carbon credits are certificates that represent quantities of greenhouse gases that have been kept out of the air or removed from it. And what is the unit that we use here? One carbon credit is equal to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere or stored in the soil. Advances in remote sensing data, satellites, artificial intelligence have enabled prediction of carbon levels by way of data collected, accumulated, which serves as the method by which carbon credits are calculated. Companies, government, individual organizations, NGOs, they are purchasers of carbon credits because they have set for themselves certain climate commitments which they would like to honor. So we may ask farmers to follow sustainable agricultural practices. In return, we educate them, tell them they can also earn some extra revenue by and through the instrument which is called a carbon credit. Carbon credits can be of two types: compliance carbon credits or voluntary carbon credits. Compliance carbon credits are used by entities that have a legal obligation to reduce their emissions. Well, a certain industry may, by part of or by way of an agreement, maybe an international agreement, a multinational agreement, or within the country targets, may be told hello, am I there in the meeting?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So if that industry is not able to reduce CO2 emissions by 10%, which was the target given by a regulatory authority or a country's government to that industry, if they've been able to do it only to the extent of 5%, then they must buy carbon credits equivalent to the balance 5% target that they could not meet. So that is a compliance carbon credit. You were supposed to comply with a certain regulation. You were supposed to comply with a particular target. You've not been able to achieve that. And for the gap, you got to pay to someone else who would have put in a lot of efforts in cutting down carbon emission. You pay to him by and through the exchange of carbon credit. Then there are voluntary carbon credits. There are companies which are voluntarily trying to cut down on the CO2 emission, not guided by any kind of a regulation, not guided by any kind of a target given by the government, but on their own, they are trying to cut down the carbon credits because of ethical, social, or business reasons. And therefore, they also become entitled to either earn a carbon credit, get revenue for that, or maybe pay for that, depending upon to what extent they've been able to cut down on the CO2 emission within their own operations. How to get carbon credits for farmers? To generate carbon credits, the interested farmer should follow the following strategies. These are the steps involved. Selection of the right carbon credit generating program. Do a baseline study of the farm in terms of what is the carbon level present in the soil as of now or as of a particular cutoff date, which is called a baseline date. start following sustainable agricultural practices. Measure, report, and verify the carbon data. So you got to measure after a particular period, 2 years, 3 years, measure what is the carbon content now in the soil, report that, get that verified by a third party who are called certifiers or assessors. And after verification, if it is found yes, you've been able to create larger quantity of carbon in the soil over a period of time by virtue of your following sustainable agricultural practices, you earn carbon credit, which a farmer can then sell in the market. The price of carbon credit in the market, it keeps on varying. Right now it's floating around $7, $8, $10. It used to be at one point of time $20, $25. It keeps on varying like the capital market. The price of carbon credit in the market also keeps on varying. But this is the step required on the part of the agriculturist or the farmer to be able to earn carbon credit over a period of time. So what is a carbon credit? Actually, how do you create a carbon credit? Carbon credit is created through complete, accurate, and thorough accounting methods. Somebody has to really check what was the carbon level in the soil as on the baseline date, what is the carbon level now, what is the increase, what is the percentage increase, and what is the absolute increase. And this has to be done completely, very, very accurately through appropriate measurement and accounting techniques. But one important aspect is the second point where I say additional. The credit is available only for those actions and available only when increase in carbon content in the soil has happened because of certain positive specific actions taken by the farmer that would not have happened without the incentive of the carbon market. In other words, if something has happened over a period of time, say the carbon content probably has gone up by 3 tons by a certain percentage without farmer doing anything extra, without farmer changing any of his agricultural practices, then it will not be considered as a carbon credit. This is the crux. There have to be certain specific efforts. There have to be certain specific actions taken by the farmer to increase the carbon content in the soil, which would not have happened if these actions were not taken by the farmer. That means this must be something additional efforts, additional initiatives. But then it has to be permanent. The changes in the soil's carbon stock must be permanent. The carbon pool in the soil must increase permanently. It is available only when it is independently verified by third-party assessors. And credits are owned by one entity at a time from creation to retirement. A unique activity, unique actions, specific actions taken by a particular farmer, they are uniquely claimed. No one else can duplicate the same thing on the same land. In other words, given only once on a particular soil, on a particular piece of land, but it must represent something which is of a permanent nature. It must arise on account of some additional efforts made by the farmer beyond what he normally does to carry out his agricultural operations. Then only a carbon credit becomes a real carbon credit, which can then be exchanged in the marketplace. So farmers can benefit from participating in the carbon market. You can't eat it, You can't drink it. Yes, but you can trade it. Carbon credits. The direct benefit is that the farmers receive cash-based incentives by selling the carbon credits. A farmer who sequesters one carbon credit can earn approximately maybe $10 at the current market prices. But as I told you, the rates of carbon credit in the exchange market, carbon exchange market, it keeps on varying from time to time. Farmers who follow sustainable agricultural practices are able to sequester 1 to 4 carbon credits per acre. Just to give you an idea, how many carbon credits can a farmer generally expect to generate? 1 to 4 carbon credits per acre is possible if they follow proper regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices. Indirectly, besides the benefit of cash, additional revenue coming to the farmer, the indirect or the real benefit is it improves the soil health because of increased carbon compounds present in the soil, which improves the fertility of the soil, the productivity of the soil. It also helps the farmer in terms of increased water holding capacity of the soil, lower soil density, increased water infiltration, increased nutrient availability, and decreased soil surface temperature. And all this leads to better productivity, better fertility for the farmers from agriculture. How do carbon credit programs work for farmers? While it is not easy for individual farmers to start practicing sequestration practices or carbon credit programs, farmer producer organizations, FPOs, who are aggregators, can definitely help them avail the benefits of carbon credit programs. FPOs have a great role to play in this initiative. How do we go for this? The first step is to promote regenerative, sustainable agriculture practices among their farmer groups. Promote sustainable, regenerative agricultural practices. Education, hand-holding, nudge, incentives, a lot of things will have to be done in order to mold the mindset of the farmers towards regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices. Since this is going to take time, it's not going to happen in 1 month, not going to happen in 1 year, it's going to take a few years. It is important to handhold and support the farmers during initial years. Show to farmers that these sustainable farming practices are a key step in the process of availing carbon credits. Then, identify an agri-tech partner or a project partner. The number of companies existing in the marketplace, you can just Google out and check out, who are trading in voluntary carbon markets. Linking with these companies will enable the FPOs, the farmers producing organizations, to be able to support the member farmers in generation and encashment of carbon credits. But before you do that, there has to be third-party verification of the data, third-party verification, measurement of the carbon increase in the soil over a period of time. So you also need to get in touch with parties or firms which are engaged in third-party verification of carbon credits. Presently, there are 2 large players existing in the carbon credit market. you have speculators, and you have pilot project developers. Speculators, they are optimistic in their mindset, in their thinking. They expect a significant growth in the carbon markets in the next few years. They are investors. They try to contract as many acres of land as they can to trade as many carbon credits as possible. Just like speculators in the stock market, you have speculators in the carbon credit market. On the other hand, there are people, ground level people, who are actually operating, developing certain projects. And these are called pilot project developers who connect with farmers, help them out, support them, and act as intermediaries between producers and buyers of carbon credit connected with agricultural projects. Both speculators and pilot project developers share the common objective of using the nudge of carbon credits to promote sustainable farming practices with a view to reducing carbon emission from the soil. I repeat here, and this has two benefits. Increased carbon pool in the soil leads to increased fertility of the soil, improved productivity of agriculture, at the same time, by stopping emission of CO2 from the soil into the Earth's atmosphere, it also reduces the greenhouse gases and thus limits the global warming to acceptable level, making it a comfortable place for all the living beings on this earth. Otherwise, the climate change, the global warming is going to have catastrophic and very, very negative economic as well as ecological impacts on all the people living on this planet. Yet there are challenges, as with any new concept for that matter. The other day we were talking about ESG, environment, societal governance. There are ESG ratings happening, but then people say there is also the danger of greenwashing. Similarly, in the area of carbon credits, there are certain challenges. The most important and critical challenge is accurate verification of the carbon content increase over a period of time on soil in a piece of land. As I told you, that first of all requires a baseline data. If you don't have a baseline data, if you want to start it now, well, you do it now. Do a baseline data analysis of the carbon present in the soil as of now, and then start sustainable agricultural practices, and then over a period of time, check out what is the increase that has happened, and that's ultimately going to be converted into a carbon credit. So challenge is accurate verification of the carbon increase in the soil from time to time. That once a project is listed, it takes about 8 to 12 months for cash incentive to arrive to farmers. I mean, that's the timeline which is involved in the carbon exchange market process. Additionally, it may take 12 to 18 months time for a project to be listed. You start a pilot project, you start sustainable farming practices, the project first of all will have to be listed, which may take anything from 12 to 18 months. And after getting listed, you start sustainable farming practices, and after a few years you check out, and if there is a net additional increase in carbon in the soil in that particular project, you apply for cash incentive. That again is going to take something like 8 to 12 months before the cash actually gets into your hand. Yes, it's a long drawn process. Thus, the amount of carbon credits received may not be enough for a small farmer to adopt sustainable agricultural practices. That's why I said it's better for a cooperative agricultural society to do this kind of a project individually, a farmer having a small holding, say just about 1 hectare or so, it may not really make sense to go for this kind of a process of following sustainable practices. Small farmers difficult to adopt regenerative agricultural practices. And because carbon credit trading is at nascent stage as of now, there is very little awareness amongst the farmers about this option which is available to them. So what can be done to address these challenges? Farmers need to be made aware about the importance of sequestering more carbon in the soil. Tell them about the benefits of carbon increase, improving fertility, improving productivity. Tell them what to do for that, and tell them this is also going to create an additional incremental revenue stream for you over a period of time. You plant a mango tree, it doesn't start giving fruits to you from day one. It takes a few years. Farmers are aware about all these things. I mean, that's the nature of their activity. Similarly, you got to convince and tell them sustainable farming practices you follow now, these are going to give you reward after a few years in two ways. Number one, it will improve the soil quality, fertility, and it will also become a source of additional revenue for you by way of generation of carbon credits. Market is very optimistic with regard to trend of the carbon credits in the marketplace. McKinsey report says the demand for carbon credits, as people become more aware, is expected to rise by 15 times approximately by 2030. The process of measuring and verifying carbon captured in the soil is improving, evolving rapidly because of the application of satellite communications, artificial intelligence, and other technological innovations. As technology continues to improve, the measurement and verification process is going to become simpler and faster. Since most carbon credit programs onboard farmer groups rather than individual farmers, the cost and the associated risk of participation is reduced for an individual farmer. It doesn't make sense for an individual farmer to look at carbon credit as something great. It's only beneficial when you have a large chunk available, pooling of chunk together, farmers coming together through a farmer producers organization or by way of some other form of joint collaboration. It doesn't really make sense for individual farmer to look at carbon credits. Similarly, there could be schemes from the government. There could be certain guidelines mandating regular estimation of soil carbon levels, and then the data obtained could be shared with carbon credit verifiers to facilitate measurement and verification process going forward. Just to give you a glimpse of the agriculture carbon market in the US, the Europe and Canada. In the US, there is the Climate Solutions Act, which gives authority to US Department of Agriculture to help farmers to take part in carbon credit markets. Government supports the development of voluntary market for agriculture carbon credit. European nations also encourage farmers to shift to sustainable farming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But European nations are still trying to draw guidelines as to how carbon credits will be recognized, calculated. They are yet to come out with the guidelines. In Canada, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change has developed greenhouse gas offset credit system Over 20 million metric tons of carbon emission reduction are from agricultural carbon credit projects in Alberta alone. Alberta Emission Offset System, Canada, covers not only agriculture, but forestry and carbon capture and storage, and carbon capture storage as well as utilization. So having talked about carbon credits in general and its benefits, let's come to specifics now as to what are those sustainable regenerative agricultural practices that would provide an opportunity to the farmers to be able to generate carbon credits and also create an additional incremental revenue streams for them going forward. What is happening as of now? Conventional farming practices are causing natural ecosystems damage as well as causing global warming. Over farming, too many crops being taken in 1 year, too much of manuring, fertilizer, chemical inputs are contaminating and depleting water tables and water sources. This is leading to soil erosion and destruction of habitats. These farming practices are one of the biggest threats to biodiversity. People are looking at worst case scenario. If this practice of traditional farming continues, the earth will become barren over a period of time, and this will lead to mass desertification of the large chunk of land present on this earth. So what should we do? We should follow regenerative, sustainable farming practices. Some of these practices are no-till farming. Very interesting. Don't plow, don't run a tractor to till the farm before you sow the seeds. Reduced soil disturbance by way of no-till farming is a great initiative to reduce carbon emissions escaping the soil of the earth. Reduce, if not end, reduce, minimize the use of synthetic pesticides. Mob grazing and manure compost can also be avoided. Maximize soil coverage by way of living roots. Soil cover. Don't let the carbon compounds escape from the soil's earth. Create a cover, create a shade. Shade of plants. Not shade made of steel or glass or whatever. Shade of plants. Promote crop rotation. Combine livestock rearing with crops and other plants. Integrate the whole ecosystem. By creating grasslands and growing cover crops, carbon can be captured and stored for a long time. And the best part is, farmers, if they follow all these practices, they can prevent soil desertification, at the same time can earn more carbon credit. If they follow these kind of practices, their land goes from being a net emitter of carbon dioxide to a land which stores more quantity of carbon, technically called the sequestration process. Their land will become a carbon sink because the carbon that gets through the roots to the soil will be stored in the sponge, and that sponge actually acts as a kind of a carbon sink. Reduction or sequestration of CO2 by sustainable farming techniques can lead to creation of carbon credits, and these credits are created and exchanged in the market to generate revenue. What is the utility of a cover crop? Cover crops are different from primary cash crops. They are planted without the intention of harvesting. That sounds very, very, very disturbing. Why should farmers plant something without the intention of harvesting? But there are plenty of other benefits, indirect benefits that arise from cover crops. They protect the soil from erosion. They allow more carbon to remain stored in the soil. They improve nutrient conditions of the soil. Cover crops are grown to help keep the soil intact, which otherwise will be bare because of wind, rain, water, and even tillage. Cover crops are becoming very popular across the world in their fight against climate change. Cover crops now account for almost about 22 million acres of land across the world, significantly higher in terms of percentage from the previous years. What are cover crops? There are several types of cover crops. Some of the common examples are barley, oats. Some of these cover crops are converted into biofuel or fed to animals. And so cover crops boost the capacity of agricultural lands to draw down carbon emissions and thus help in earning of carbon credits. Benefits of cover crops: increase crop yield, sequester carbon, store carbon, more carbon in the soil, provide habitat for the pollinators, absorb rain and retain soil moisture, and improve soil health and water quantity. It is estimated that 20 million acres of cover crops can sequester 66 million tons of CO2 equivalent in a year. This is as per the research data. This is equal to emission of about 13 million vehicles. Cover crops enhance soil sequestration that also improves farm productivity. That is why growing cover crops qualifies as a carbon offset program. It means the crops can make carbon credits and give farmers additional revenue. More and more farmers are considering cover crops for the additional revenue potential emanating from the carbon credits. This is how a cover crop is like. All this is not harvestable. This is just a cover crop with a view to protecting the soil and with a view to ensuring that the CO2 trapped in the soil is not emitted into the Earth's atmosphere. And this has a lot of benefits, both direct as well as indirect for the farmers. Farm practices can drastically cut down carbon emissions. Nitrogen management, cover crops, no tilling, all these practices can lead to huge reduction in carbon footprint or carbon emissions, and this can be a direct contribution of agricultural sector to the management of climate change on this planet. So we are looking for sustainable agriculture for a better world. Sustainable agriculture is all about farming that meets the needs of existing and future generations while ensuring profitability, environmental health, social and economic equity. It will prevent pollution, it will protect biodiversity, it will preserve soil fertility, and at the macro level, it will help you achieve the sustainable development goals and the goal of zero hunger. Sustainable agriculture is economically viable, socially supportive, the quality of life of the farmer becomes better, ecologically sound. It helps in protection of the ecology, the natural biosystem that we have, and therefore sustainable agriculture is economically, socially, and ecologically beneficial. Sustainability also means keeping the soil healthy, preventing soil erosion, managing water wisely, minimizing air and water pollution, sequestration of carbon, storing carbon on the land, increasing adaptability, resilience to extreme climate change conditions, and promoting biodiversity. All these are possible if we start moving towards regenerative and sustainable farming practices. What needs to be done? There are certain principles. Improving efficiency in the use of resources is crucial for sustainable agriculture. Besides that, direct action to conserve, protect, and enhance natural resources. Direct action is required to be taken. Agriculture that fails to protect and improve rural livelihoods is not sustainable. Sustainable agriculture must enhance resilience of the people, communities, societies, ecosystems, and good governance of agriculture is a vital component or a vital requirement for developing a sustainable farming practices architecture. What are sustainable agricultural practices? Rotating crops. Planting a variety of crops can have many benefits. Crop diversity practices include intercropping, growing 2 crops at the same time, 3 crops at the same time, and also complex multi-year crop rotations. Planting cover crops that we just talked about. Reducing or eliminating tillage, no till. So how do we sow seed if there is no tilling? Traditional plowing prepares fields for planting and prevents weed problem, but it can cause soil loss. No till or reduced till methods, which involve inserting seeds directly into an undisturbed soil, can reduce erosion and help improve soil health. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Without tilling, without plowing, without tractor, you are able to sow seeds in the field. It's actually happening in many of the European farms. Applying integrated pest management. A range of methods, including mechanical and biological controls, can be applied to keep pest population under control while minimizing use of chemical pesticides. Don't only look at agriculture as one activity. Go for an integrated ecosystem. Integrate livestock and crops together. A growing body of evidence shows that smart integration of crop and animals can make farms more efficient and profitable. Adopt agroforestry practices. Mix trees into their operation, mix shrubs into their operations, which can provide shade and shelter that protects plants and animals, while also potentially offering additional income from fruits or nut crops. Go for those kind of irrigation practices which are less water consuming. Sustainability aims to support plant hydration needs, yet optimize water and energy consumption. Develop those varieties of plants which require less water. And follow those kind of irrigation practices like drip irrigation, furrow irrigation, which require 20 to 40% less water, while providing increased productivity to the extent of 20 to 50%. Manage whole system and landscapes. Sustainable farms treat uncultivated areas as integral to their farm. Natural vegetation within or around crop fields can help control erosion, reduce nutrient runoff, support bees and other pollinators, and biodiversity in general. Permaculture, permanent agriculture and culture. One of the important concepts in sustainable agriculture. Permaculture imitates naturally established ecosystems with their diversity, stability, and harmony. The technique promotes sustainability by reducing waste, using replenishable sources, tackling pollution, and improving soil fertility in nature-friendly ways. The choice of sustainable agriculture activities depends upon geographical area, the topography, the location, the kind of crop that's being produced there, and also the specific techniques of farming used by a farmer. Everything will have to be considered in a holistic management basis with a view to identifying what is the best sustainable practice effectively applicable on a particular land, can be followed by a particular farmer. What many of these practices have in common is their focus on soil. Protect the soil, keep the soil healthy. To help farmers adopt sustainable practices, it is vitally important that we continue to support agroecology research along with awareness creation, outreach, education that can help farmers make effective use of research. What are the emerging areas of action so that we can do something about creating an ecosystem for sustainable agricultural operations? Advocate for agriculture policy that supports both positive environmental and social outcomes. Develop and design ecosystem markets that enable farmers to capture new value in following regenerative sustainable agricultural practices. Focus on the objective of social equity and empower farmers' access to markets by replicating and linking up new value networks and reforming procurement processes and systems. The main takeaway is that there is a potential carbon market for the farmers, but it is still evolving. It will take time to mature and ripen. Carbon credits should be viewed like any other crop. Not all farmers will be able to take advantage of carbon credits. Results and revenue will also not be the same for all farmers. But the farmers need to be educated to adopt a more holistic approach to maintaining their financial stability and environmental stewardship in the face of changing climate by prioritizing practices, reducing costs, and improve crop yield resilience. We as CMAs, we can play a huge facilitative role in the whole context of carbon credits. We need to create awareness amongst the farmers with regard to the existence and benefits of carbon credit programs so that many and most of the farmers can start practicing sustainable agricultural practices and can benefit from the carbon credit program. So we have a huge role to play in education, outreach, awareness creation for the farmers. And for that, we can create awareness programs, training workshops, in different places, different locations, different areas to educate and engage farmers, encouraging them to get actively involved in sustainable agricultural practices. There are many financial institutions which are offering concessional funding or grants for the carbon projects undertaken by the farmers. Farmers may not be aware about that. We CMAs can study, read the guidelines of various financial institutions, and then go and tell the farmers and also help them to obtain that concessional funding from the FI and thus promote and incentivize them for taking up carbon projects. We can support transparent carbon sequestration and soil health projects. Derivatives can play an essential role in carbon markets. Companies or other farmers subject to carbon credit projects can use carbon derivatives to manage risk in a most efficient or a cost efficient manner. A large share of the cost of producing carbon credits comes in a project's planning and establishment phase. And the project, as I told you, may take number of years before you can actually start generating carbon credit from there. Farmers will need hand-holding, farmers will need financing to take up the project and then ride through the project for a few years before it starts generating carbon credit. And that's where we CMAs can handhold, provide support, provide consultancy, connect them with the financial institution, arrange finances for them so that they are able to tide over the time period between the start of the carbon project and the time when the actual carbon credit revenue starts flowing to the farmers. If some of us are motivated by today's session and we really want to play a role in this area of carbon credits in agriculture, what do we need to do? We need to develop proficiency. It's a new area, it's a new subject. Just one lecture of 1.5 hour duration may not be sufficient to fully understand or grasp the nuances and technicalities of this particular concept. We need to read, research, talk to people, and get competent enough, develop proficiency to be able to provide consultancy and support to the farmers in this area of carbon credits. Training. For this, we need to undergo training. There are trainings in carbon credit management being offered by various organizations. You can Google out and find out both national as well as international. There are also some online courses, certification courses available. It will be very useful if you want to get into this field, try and get some certification training in this area. Collaboration is very important. Just as in the case of any kind of practice as a cost accountant, practice as a lawyer, whatever, you need to collaborate with people with a view to building up your network and building up a team so that all of you can work together in this exciting domain of carbon credits. Yes, accreditation certification programs, I told you, you must look out for them and get yourself certified and stay updated. The whole concept and philosophy of carbon credits is yet evolving, and therefore you must keep yourself updated with regard to latest knowledge, latest standards, latest measurement techniques so that you are able to provide quality services to your clients, quality services to the farmers in the marketplace. That's where I close my presentation. Thank you so very much for joining me today for this presentation. I hope I've been able to provide you at least a basic understanding or a glimpse of what carbon credits are all about and how carbon credits are relevant for the agriculture, and also what are the possible professional opportunities for the CMAs in this new emerging exciting domain of carbon credits. Thank you so much. In case there are any questions or views, I shall be pleased to answer a few questions to the best of my ability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative deliberations. I hope all enjoyed the sessions like me, because I have been back and what I am now, at least little things I can say somebody about carbon credit because I have been updated through your deliberations.
Thank you so much, madam. Thank you.
Sir, one question, can a CMA work as an auditor to verify the carbon credit? That
yes, please. Yes, please. There's no qualification prescribed by any regulatory authorities. So we CMAs can ourselves, first of all, become expert by undergoing some kind of a training, doing some kind of a certification course, and then we can act as certified assessors.
Sir, I have been updated in that way. This baseline data analysis is required to be maintained. 12 to 18 months time for a project to be listed, long drawn process on the sides of the farmers. The Cooperative Agricultural Society for handling the carbon credits, the importance. So that importance, that building is, it will rise rapidly for satellite implementation and artificial intelligence. And again, how agriculture market of US, UK and Canada they are practicing in that way to reduce the greenhouse gases. Regenerative sustainable farming practices, everything we should know, and this is, I think, the only lecture cannot give all these insights. So we would request you, rather I will request you only as a secretary of the Cooperative Development Board, the area where our members can be enlightened further by taking more sessions.
Anytime, madam, anytime.
Yeah,
anytime.
Really such a nice deliberations have energized us to step forward. I believe.
You so much.
Thank you, sir. I want to end up the session with your kind permission. I think members have enjoyed a lot. Thank you, sir. Continue.